Welcome to this timely UNITAR event on Women's Leadership for Peace as we celebrate this week the International Women's Day. My name is Tina Robiolle and I have the privilege to moderate this meeting gathering impressive gender champions for the launch today of UNITAR's Women Leadership for Peace program. Beside this Zoom meeting, we are also live on Facebook, so I also welcome our audience there. We'll also be able to ask questions during the Q&A section of this event. This event is going to be translated simultaneously in French and in Spanish, so people who are on the Zoom meeting can click on the globe to select the language that you prefer, and I'm very grateful for their support of our team of translators. So before I introduce our distinguished speakers, it is now my great honor to give the floor to Mr. Nikhil Seth, who is the Executive Director of UNITAR, and an international gender champion himself. So he's going to offer the opening remarks for this event. Mr. Seth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And thank you all for joining us today for the launch of UNITAR's Women's Leadership in Peace program. It is my special pleasure to welcome you all to this event. And I would like to extend my gratitude to Madame Bineta Diop and Elayne and all the other panelists who are joining us today and helping make this event memorable. Last year was full of unprecedented challenges for all of us, and I'm incredibly proud of how we at UNITAR adjusted to the situation and turned these challenges into an opportunity for innovation and for our ability to reach so many more people than we have ever done before. The Women's Leadership for I think there's an open mic somewhere and maybe, yes, I think it's fine now. The Women's Leadership for Peace program is a reflection of how UNITAR has managed to maintain a remarkable high level of performance. We have been helped by Sweden and SIDA in contributions to the UNITAR's Strategic Framework Fund, where the Division for Peace and the Division for Multilateral Diplomacy was able to support the pilot phase of this program. Thank you, Sweden, for your support. Of course, as all of you know, UNITAR helps member states, individuals, organizations, institutions to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development by providing modern and innovative learning services that meet high international quality standards. We have been able to scale up and have a much greater footprint and impact than ever before. We have all kinds of courses, from short duration courses to medium and longer term courses, but the outcome of our work and the evaluation we get on the outcome has been uniformly positive. And we've contributed to the development of knowledge and skill sets to all these types of beneficiaries, as I mentioned, individuals, institutions, governments, organizations. And we always hope that our learning results in broader organizational and institutional changes. I'm here very proud to be in my capacity also as an international gender champion. And I have had a long-term commitment to breaking down gender barriers. And I'm determined to make gender equality a working reality in whatever my sphere of influence is. And gender equality is really a priority within all activities of UNITAR, at least. When I was helping negotiate the Sustainable Development Goals, many felt that the women's goal on women's empowerment and equality should be only one standalone goal. But if you actually read the SDGs, we managed to mainstream the issue of gender equality and empowerment in many of the goals and targets of the SDG agenda. It's not a standalone goal. It has to be a part of everything we do. And here is where attitudinal and behavioral change of the type that I spoke of when I talked about the role of UNITAR is extremely, extremely important. In the area of peace and security, as we all know, has been very male-dominated for so many decades and centuries, actually. We need to continue to work together to make the world more inclusive and equal. Last year, we commemorated many landmark activities, the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration, of which I was a part of also, and the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And we were made aware through these commemorations and celebrations of the invaluable contribution made by women to our societies and globally. Last year also saw a terrible setback to the cause of women's equality and empowerment. And we've been reading how deeply the COVID-19 crisis impacted on human rights, especially of women and girls. And it saw a real downturn last year. Violence against women and girls increased everywhere. And trafficking in women saw an uptick. The major burden from COVID-19 impacted largely and disproportionately against women. And there were more women unemployed as a result of the crisis, and more girls than boys left the education systems. But wherever, we've also seen last year, wherever women were in leadership positions, from New Zealand to Finland, the response to the crisis was much more effective. The images that will stay with us forever from 2020 is of health workers, researchers, those involved in vaccine innovations, distribution, and these were predominantly women's faces. And that is something we need to remember, that women were at the forefront of the response to this crisis. As we gather today, I'm thrilled to see so many of you restating and sharing your commitment to work continuously for the realization of gender equality. Since early 2020, UNITAR has been developing a Women's Leadership for Peace program to contribute to how we can have durable and lasting peace and security. With a particular focus on UNITAR's experience in providing capacity development opportunities to those working on the Women, Peace and Security agenda, the Women's Leadership for Peace program will provide participants with an unrivaled set of opportunities through shared experiences and the further development of knowledge and skills to advance to leadership positions in their respective contexts. You will hear more about what is the content of this program from the Division of Peace. But before closing my remarks, I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you all to speak up for equality and justice as we work to create a better and more sustainable future for all. I wanted to thank all my colleagues in UNITAR for their selfless and hard work and commitment to gender equality. And to the panelists, I want to thank you for joining us once again. And we welcome your vision, your practical advice and ideas, how we can collectively work towards gender equality, particularly in these male-dominated fields like peace and security. And finally, to all of you, and I see 202 participants who have joined us, I really hope that you will leave this event feeling inspired and with the momentum for contributing towards addressing the global challenges we face, including poverty, inequality, peace and justice, environmental degradation, the list goes on, but through this prism of our collective action and through the promotion of gender equality, we will and we shall make a dent. So thank you very much, Tina.
Thank you so much, Nikhil, for these really hopeful opening remarks. And thank you and all the UNITAR staff also for championing the Women, Peace and Security agenda through the important programs that you just described and reminded us. So the official launch of UNITAR's Women Leadership for Peace program that you mentioned today and through this event is, I think, a great opportunity to give this timely and much needed platform for advancing the discussions about the importance, but also the current challenges that women in leadership face within the peace and security fields. So we thought it would be interesting today to also hear from diverse perspectives and by giving voice to experts from the fields of human rights, the security sector, the world of diplomacy, but also training. Before we move to a short presentation of UNITAR's Women Leadership for Peace program, so everybody can learn more about it and move to the panel's discussion around these experts, I'm now really delighted to warmly welcome and introduce Madame Bineta Diop, the African Union's Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security. So Madame Diop has kindly accepted to deliver the keynote speech today, in which she's going to share her perspective on the importance of having women in positions of leadership if we want to achieve lasting peace, but also some of her experiences working on those issues on the African continent. Madame Diop, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tina Robiolle, for facilitating this discussion. And let me recognize Ms. Nichols, the Executive Director of UNITAR and the International Gender Champion, and all panelists here present. Let me start by wishing you a happy Women's Month, as we are in the week of the International Women's Day, and bring you the best wishes of the chairperson of the AUC, His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, who is also another gender champion in our continent. So addressing this occasion, let me just quote Her Excellency Elayne Johnson Sirleaf, the former president of Liberia and patron of the Africa Women Leaders Network, AWLIN, and I quote, the data is clear. Communities, companies, and country do better and don't have to build back better if women have equal self-agency, voice, and power. End of quote. Indeed, women leadership matters. And I salute today UNITAR initiative to launch the Women Leadership for Peace program, which will contribute, I'm sure, contribute to the global efforts to enhance the role and leadership of women in peace processes. This is one of the cardinal pillars of the endeavors by the African Union Commission through my office to ensure that the voices of the voiceless are heard and their agency recognized and integrated in Africa's effort to build a peaceful and prosperous Africa, in line with the Agenda 2063, the aspiration of the Africa we want, we the people of the continent. So I think ample evidence exists from the ground on concrete peace action by women. Allow me to share few examples. Some 30 years ago, civil wars and violent political crises erupted in the Mano River region. It's in West Africa, comprising of Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and joined later on by Cote d'Ivoire, causing more than 500 deaths and the destruction of the life of many lives and the community's environment. And ultimately, the Accra Peace Agreement, the Akosombo Agreement signed in August 2003, ushered in a period of peace in the region. I recall that even that time, the UN was pulling out on that region. The role of women in this process, mobilized through the Mano River Women Peace Network, has been widely documented and recognized by the General Assembly of the United Nations, who award them the Peace Prize. Later on, I'm sure that the leadership of Nobel Peace Laureate Lima Bowie and Elayne Johnson Sirleaf have been recognized as well in this process of women contributing to peace in Africa. During the Burundi negotiation held in Arusha, starting from 1998, it's another great example with the negotiator, President Mandela, but then before it was President Nyerere. Women came together in a unified approach. In 2000, an all-party Burundian Women's Peace Conference was held in Arusha, in which they addressed key issues and joined force to influence the outcome into an inclusive agreement. In the Democratic Republic, during the Sun City peace talks, women represented 12% of delegates, helped to broaden the agenda and break through deadlocks in the negotiation. I witnessed those 3 examples being part of supporting the women's group, and those are great, and there are many more that we can share, with our women's organization across the world. I'm giving this example to illustrate that indeed women do play an important role in bringing parties in conflict to peace. Even more important, as referred to in the concept note of this event, data has shown that the involvement of women makes peace agreement last longer. In peace operation like AMISOM, we have seen women at the forefront of ensuring that communities are safe and feel part and parcel of the peace effort to rebuild their communities. I was many times in Somalia and witnessed the work that the women in the AMISOM have been leading as well. When women lead in distribution of food in refugee camps, it's likely to benefit to the entire community, the men and the children as well. So yet, as we stand here, we know that progress has been very limited in terms of representation, effective participation, and leadership in peace process across the world, not just in Africa. Maybe we can ask ourselves how many women have lead mediation, are being lead mediators in Africa. I could say when it comes to track 3, we see that women are mobilizing at community level. They have been given the task. When we look at the track 2 as well, when we know that civil society and organization are also impacting on the ground as well. But when it comes to the track 1, we have seen few women leading the mediation. I know that Graça Machel, as an example in Kenya with Kofi Annan, were co-leader on the peace negotiation. I know also Ellen Johnson in the DRC, the Sun City, and Madame Ruth Perry in the Burundi case. All of them were part of those negotiations, but just at another level, like leading the committees, some of the committees like reconciliation committees or justice committees. So indeed, 2 decades after the adoption of the landmark resolution 1325, we are far from the level of women leadership that will mark a true shift from rhetoric to true change on the ground. Time for women to lead at the table of negotiation is now. If we take only one pillar of 1325, which is a pillar of participation, we have in the governance mechanism, we have 51 countries across the world that have reached the minimum target of 30% representation in decision making. In Africa, we have 11 countries. We are proud. It's not much. We have 54 countries, but we have 11 representing 20% of member states that have achieved that threshold. Among those, there are 5 countries in the top range, including Rwanda is the first, the top in the world, 61.3%. South Africa, 45.8%. Namibia, 44.2%. Senegal, my own country, 43%, and Mozambique, 42%. So yeah, there are some progress since the Beijing platform 25 after Beijing. So the figures show that there is a need to accelerate action for an enhanced role and leadership of women in true peace anchored on human security approach. Organizations like UNITAR has a huge role to play in, as has been said by the ED of UNITAR, in building the capacity of women and men in peace building processes, in research, providing the skills, the tool, generating knowledge and sharing those knowledge across communities, providing the necessary tool to all stakeholders. So in our side, when it comes to the African Union Commission, we have focused on two major undertakings. Let me just briefly highlight those undertakings. First, we try to enhance accountability because we have a lot of policies, but what we need to do is implementation. So we started by looking how member states can deliver on their commitment to implementation of WPS. We adopted a continental result framework that really support member states to monitor in a systematic manner based on clear defined indicators. And we try to look at the status of women of WPS in our countries, different countries. And again, the chairperson have utilized this framework to issue an annual report on the status of the implementation. We are going to launch this month the second report of the chairperson on women, peace and security. Over the last few years, we have seen progress in Africa with national action plan. When I started my mandate, it was 17 countries. Seven years later, we have 30 member states that have adopted national action plan on women, peace and security. So it's a work in progress and we need to continue. So let me say now, second, what we have done as well as AUC, we have joined force with civil society, women's organizations, UN agencies, and other stakeholders to strengthen women leadership through the establishment of platform. We have held last year in December, the first Women Forum on WPS in Africa. And that helped to mobilize and galvanize this initiative and action for peace. And we launched the campaign, She Lead Peace campaign, which is another milestone in our mobilization effort. And we are happy that UNITAR is joining She Lead Peace campaign today with your initiative that will be part and parcel of the She Lead Peace campaign in our continent. And I'm sure other continents will also follow through. AUC has created a network of women mediators, and we are very happy that after the FemWise were created, we have many other FemWise in the world as well, which build a platform at the global level of women mediators network. We have also established Africa Women Leaders Network, a continental women movement supported by UN and African Union, which ensure that women are at the front and their agenda are at the center of the transformation of the continent. We hope that other continents will also launch such an initiative. What we have identified as priority are governance, peace and security, the issue of young women leadership as well. We have also established 25 national chapters with the support of Germany and 25 countries of Africa. We need to do more. And I think this platform will help to take the agenda further down to the grassroots for women leadership at all levels in our society for Africa transformation. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, let me just say that COVID-19 pandemic has shown the world that effective responses to crisis must be anchored on inclusive approaches, catering for needs of community. We have seen the gaps when it comes to our education, to the health, to so many other sectors that we saw in, especially in conflict zone, that there is why we should be together to build the peace. Peace means that we reaffirm, if necessary, that there is a development agenda and we need to be together to build peace and bring development in our continent. That's why Africa Women Leaders Network adopted this holistic approach, endeavoring to enhance the leadership of women in bringing about true change for communities, not just at top level, but leadership means that you engage your community, and from down you bring them at the top level. So this will help us and help the community that build back better. We shall continue to reach out to grassroots women, such as the Solidarity Mission that we conducted jointly with Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General, and the UN Women Executive Director. Such a mission helps us to evaluate the impact on the ground, but also to scale it up and leapfrog some of those solutions that are existing on the ground. So solidarity to women should continue post-COVID. As I conclude, let me once again commend UNITAR for launching the program on women leadership in peace and take the opportunity to reiterate my commitment, my office commitment, the African Union commitment to join force with you, building on the collaboration that we already exist among our two offices to deliver of our common agenda, on our common agenda for securing women for a transformed world where no one is left behind. Thank you for your kind attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Madame Diop, for your energetic words, but also thank you for all your efforts and the African unions in shifting, as you said, from rhetoric to true change on the ground at all levels. I was particularly pleased to hear you mention the example of women in Burundi and their strategic role in the peace process. It's not an example that we often hear about, and so thank you for that. Now, let's hear more about the Women's Leadership for Peace program that UNITAR is launching today with Ms. Svenja Volmer, who is a specialist and team leader in the Youth and Women Empowerment section of UNITAR. Svenja, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tina. And I have a presentation that I will share via my screen. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming and for joining us today in the launch of the Women's Leadership for Peace program of UNITAR. Thank you very much for Nikhil for your kind opening words. And thank you very much for Madame Diop to start this discussion off so nicely with your inspiring and insightful words. Thank you to Dr. Tina Robiolle for moderating this event. And thank you to all the panelists. And last but not least, also thank you to my colleagues who've really made this event happen. My name is Svenja Volmer. As Tina said, I'm team leader for youth and women empowerment within UNITAR's division for peace. And together with my team, we have developed the Women's Leadership for Peace program over the past year. And of course, I can't speak about this without saying that, of course, at the core of all of our work is the SDG 16, contributing to peaceful, just and inclusive societies. And for us, looking at women's empowerment and gender equality in that framework is just paramount. And of course, with UNITAR's specific mandate on training and capacity building that Nikhil has already presented, we're looking at this from the question of how can we create, how can we support those who are already in this field doing wonderful work to be even more impactful and to really scale up their work as well. So I want all of us to take just 1 second to look at these pictures and ask ourselves, what do we notice? This is connected to our why we are launching this program today. And I think probably the question that we have asked ourselves is very obvious. The question is, where are the women? All of the pictures that you have seen are pictures from rooms in which peace agreements have been negotiated. And if we look at this again, there are the women. And what we want to achieve together with all of the other agencies, UN agencies, and also other actors, regional actors, civil society actors that are already working tirelessly to promote women's leadership for peace. We are today with this program aiming to join forces and to build synergies. So this program that we're launching today has 4 core components. One is a leadership course. The second one is an online platform. The third one is a mentorship and a buddy system. And the fourth and last one is presence at high-level events. The leadership course, and I will go into brief oversights on that just in a minute, is really looking at what can we do from a perspective of skills building, training, learning, to support emerging women leaders to reach leadership positions and to step into their power. The online platform that we're envisioning building together with partners has the aim to bring together all of the scattered resources that are available. There are beautiful resources that lie dormant, and what we are aiming to do together with other key players and key actors, both in the UN system and beyond, to build a joint learning, knowledge sharing platform that will serve the purpose to really have these resources available to everyone who's looking for those. We also conducted in the build-up to this program a really extensive needs assessment and scoping, and we had brilliant conversations with the panelists that have joined us today and beyond across different sectors. And one of the elements that became apparent is that what is missing as well for women to take this next step, or feeling as well, or seeing and feeling the opportunities of reaching leadership positions in the peace and security fields, is to have networks and to have access to networks, to be supported by peers. And so the third element of this program is a mentorship and buddy system that we are aiming to create. And last but not least, we want to join forces with all of the organizations that already work around building a bigger presence of women at high-level events, as and where the wider peace and security items, agenda items are being discussed, so that the pictures that we've seen just now will not repeat, but that we see more women in those rooms and spaces. So for whom is this program? It's called Women's Leadership for Peace program. And so the program is open to everyone who self-identifies as a woman. And we are specifically looking at emerging women leaders in the peace and security fields. And that has several reasons. There is a brilliant few women who are in leadership positions that are holding the torch for those to come. And those are visible, but those are too little. And we also have seen that in conversations now, and we are very grateful for that, there's a lot of programs supporting young women leaders. But those in their mid-career, that are aiming to really take these steps to and broaden the pool of women who are in leadership positions in peace and security fields, there's a gap in the offer, what is there in terms of capacity building, learning offers. And so we are specifically looking at emerging women leaders with this program to support a broader cohort of women leaders eventually. And we are looking at this across different sectors and working with cohorts of learners. So we are seeking to build partnerships with organizations that are working in this field, and with whom we will work, who will nominate cohorts of their female staff or female colleagues to be benefiting from the Women's Leadership for Peace program. I will not speak very extensively about the training and the program itself, but for us, really the question was, how can we build something that has relevance across the many different realities and professional sectors that are present in the peace and security field, and that still will speak to the many realities that women and emerging women leaders face. So we have defined 5 core themes for this program, and you can see them here on the screen. They are clarity. So who are you in this world? Who are you, and what is really at the core, what you stand for? authenticity. So how do you lead authentically as a woman in this field, in alignment with your values and also in alignment with where you want to reach? Power, this is an interesting one for many women, that's and especially in the peace and security fields as well, is something that is very important to look at. How do we support emerging women leaders to look at what the power notions are and how they can also step into their power to step into leadership positions? Well-being is also central, because only those who are able to take care of themselves and situate themselves in their own lives and context, and they're able to be taken care of and taking care of others, will be able to effectively lead a change as well. And the element of connection that we already touched upon with regards to the networks. And last but not least, we have here this element of mastery. And this is really where this modular training offer that we have built will be adaptable to the different professions that we have within this field. So meaning we of course recognize and acknowledge that the realities of a female peacekeeper, the hard skills and really the mastery of certain elements of that profession will be different than for a woman mediator. Last but not least, the learning journey and the offer of the Women's Leadership for Peace program will be is that this will be clustered around the SOGI model, which is a model that is very well known in the wider leadership world. And so these dimensions that I just shared in the previous slide of what are the core principles of the course will then be translated into what does this mean to be a woman leader in the peace and security field for the self, so as a person? What does this mean within the context of groups, so meaning leading teams, leading people, relating to people, building relationships, effective relationships in the context of the organization, so organizational culture, and also organization in terms of what are your pathways? And last but not least, what is the really societal change that you as a woman leader in the peace and security field want to contribute to by stepping into the leadership position? So this is the backbone of the program we are launching today. And one of the core principles of UNITAR's work is partnership. So with this launch today, we are also seeking to really spread the word. We are looking at piloting this program with a few, in partnership with a few organizations that already have signaled interest to nominate pilot cohorts. But we really are seeking to build and grow this program together in partnership with others in the UN system and beyond. So we would be delighted to be contacted and build further partnerships around this program. And so with that, I will close and thank you again to Tina and the panelists, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svenja, for presenting more information about this strategic program that, if I understand well, is particularly designed for emerging women leaders, as you explained. And I know that you and the UNITAR team have been effortlessly working on it in this past year, so congratulations for this launch. I'm now delighted to introduce our panel and our distinguished guest speakers, who are all experts from the fields of human rights, security sector, or the world of diplomacy or training. Thank you all so much for your time today. So our speakers, just to explain to our audience a little bit how this is going to work, they're each going to talk for about 5 minutes. We asked all of them to first maybe highlight one example that underpins why they believe we need to collectively work together to increase the representation of women in leadership positions at all levels and within peace and security contexts, but especially in their field of work. And if they can also present maybe one real challenge that they have faced or witnessed regarding women reaching positions of leadership in this sector. And if time allows, then they can also discuss, if in their opinion, what is still missing to address existing capacity gaps or to successfully achieve gender equality in this context. So to start, I'm really honored to give the floor now to Her Excellency Elayne Whyte Gómez, who was the former ambassador for Costa Rica at the UN in Geneva. So Ambassador Whyte Gómez, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning from Costa Rica to everybody. Let me switch to Spanish because I want to use this privilege of being able to speak in Spanish. Y primero que todo, yo quisiera empezar dándole mis muy sinceras felicitaciones a UNITAR y a su director ejecutivo, Nikhil Seth, por desarrollar este programa para promover el liderazgo de la mujer en los campos de la paz y la seguridad. Y muchas gracias por esta presentación, es un programa maravilloso. Mis felicitaciones son efusivas porque yo soy una representante de esa primera generación de mujeres que tuvo la oportunidad de ejercer liderazgo político con las puertas que abrió el programa de acción de Beijing en 1995. Y en ese contexto, como generación pionera, no contábamos con tantos recursos como tenemos hoy día, ni tan asentada de que es fundamental el vínculo entre género, paz y seguridad. Yo reconozco que con el 25 aniversario de la Declaración de Beijing y el 20 aniversario de la Resolución 1325 del Consejo de Seguridad, se ha producido un nuevo impulso de una creciente conciencia y conocimiento de los vínculos entre género y los desafíos de la paz y la seguridad, y para visibilizar los esfuerzos que ya se habían construido por muchos años. Creo que estos esfuerzos van a producir recursos muy valiosos como este programa, y una nueva generación de mujeres van a poder aprovechar de tener todos estos recursos de conocimiento que nosotras no teníamos para tener tal vez un poquito más de incidencia en el trabajo que realizamos, pero también para promover que haya una nueva generación de formación de políticas que respondan y que den una respuesta de género en los campos de paz y seguridad. Yo estoy segura de que estos nuevos recursos van a producir un impacto positivo en lograr fundamentales. Primero, que es más participación equitativa entre hombres y mujeres en procesos de paz, seguridad, desarme, no proliferación, control de armamentos, todo lo que tiene que ver con los conflictos y el uso de la fuerza. Y logrando esa mayor participación, vamos a lograr también un enfoque más rico y más participativo, que traiga diferentes enfoques a la solución de los problemas antiguos. Y también necesitamos seguir creando conciencia cada vez mayor de los impactos diferenciados que las armas, los armamentos y los conflictos tienen en hombres, mujeres, niñas y niños. Por eso debemos asegurar enfoques sensibles al género para abordar esos impactos y para proteger más y mejor a las mujeres y las niñas en esos contextos. Para alcanzar estos objetivos, ciertamente en el marco de la Agenda 2030 de los ODS, debemos trabajar en dos ámbitos a la vez. Primero, el ámbito de potenciar a las mujeres, que es el tema que está trabajando este programa de UNITAR de una manera brillante. También necesitamos generar conocimientos sobre lo que significa este enfoque de género en paz y seguridad. Y a la vez es muy importante que podamos tener un diálogo muy positivo con el propio establishment de seguridad y de defensa, porque tenemos que generar un impacto en la forma en que se desarrolla el pensamiento de ese establishment y generar un cambio en ese pensamiento. Por esta razón, en el primer punto de el potenciar a las mujeres, yo veo con mucha esperanza que este programa de UNITAR trabajará en un curso de liderazgo transformador, trabajará en generar una plataforma de intercambio de conocimientos y aprendizaje en línea, y me gusta mucho el hecho de que este programa también va a construir una comunidad que comunica a mentores, compañeras, con oportunidades para que las mujeres aprendan y aprendamos de otras mujeres en posiciones de liderazgo, que nos inspiren las mejores prácticas, poder tener una red de mentores, aprendices, mentoras, aprendices, exalumnas, que nos brindemos apoyo mutuamente, intercambiando experiencias y conocimiento. Pero también me parece que es este tipo de programas y conocimientos, por lo menos en mi caso, habría sido sumamente valioso haber podido tener este programa hace 21 años, cuando yo fui nombrada como la primera mujer viceministra de Relaciones Exteriores de mi propio país, Costa Rica. En esa capacidad, fui la primera mujer en liderar la Comisión de Seguridad en mi región Centroamérica. Trabajé de la mano con oficiales militares y de seguridad para promover un nuevo paradigma de seguridad, la seguridad humana, que se pudiera implementar en la región centroamericana luego de los conflictos bélicos de la década de los 80. También me habría sido muy útil más adelante cuando, como embajadora de mi país ante las Naciones Unidas, fui responsable de presidir la conferencia de las Naciones Unidas que negoció la prohibición jurídica de las armas nucleares. ¿Por qué habría sido muy valioso para mí? Para haber tenido más acceso al conocimiento, a las expertas que están allí y sobre todo a fortalecer el caso de nuestro liderazgo y también de abordar de una manera específica los temas de las mujeres. Voy a hacer una mención muy breve de que en el caso de todo lo que tiene que ver con el uso de la energía nuclear, hoy sabemos que la radiación ionizante es mucho mayor y más negativo en las mujeres y en las niñas que en el resto de la población. Por lo tanto, en materia de desarme nuclear y en materia de trabajar con el tema de energía nuclear, es absolutamente fundamental aportar un enfoque de género. Desde mi experiencia, el otro aspecto que falta para abordar esas brechas de capacidad y lograr éxito en la igualdad de género en estos contextos es desencadenar un cambio organizativo y cultural, como decía, en ese propio establishment de paz, seguridad, seguridad y defensa en todo el ámbito militar y de uso de la fuerza. La formulación de políticas de género en paz y seguridad necesita un cambio sistemático en las estructuras, procesos y sobre todo un cambio de paradigmas. Este programa de UNITAR no necesariamente está llamado a generar un impacto en ese campo, necesariamente, pero eventos de alto nivel podrán ayudar a involucrar personas del establishment, ojalá con perspectivas de las necesidades específicas que tiene cada región en el mundo. Lo que también este programa puede beneficiarse muchísimo para lograr ese objetivo es, y esto para concluir, es aprovechar el ecosistema de las Naciones Unidas en Ginebra, la plataforma de trabajo de SDG Lab y establecer enlaces con otros foros que tienen sede en Ginebra como UDINIR, UNIDIR, UNODA o International Gender Champions, que tiene un grupo de apoyo sobre desarme y tienen una plataforma también de conocimiento recientemente creada. Entonces, por ejemplo, aprovechar un ecosistema, se puede conectar y ampliar las plataformas de conocimiento para aumentar las posibilidades de que las participantes también puedan actuar como multiplicadoras a nivel nacional y local y que en general la arquitectura de paz y seguridad se beneficie más de estos recursos de liderazgo que este programa va a generar y que otras iniciativas están generando. En este sentido, yo deseo entonces desearles muchísimos éxitos en estos esfuerzos y agradezco muchísimo que me hayan invitado a participar en este evento. Paso de nuevo la palabra. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gómez. And it's always so powerful to hear from, an important member of this pioneer generation of women that you reminded us of, who have been leading the way after the 95 Beijing Declaration. So time is really running, and it's always a bit frustrating to have so less, time available to hear all of you. So I will ask, the upcoming speakers to really keep their remarks to the 5 minutes. I'm very pleased to give the floor now to Ms. Tracy Ostertag, who is Security Sector Reform Advisor and former Gender Advisor for the Canadian Police Mission in Ukraine. Ms. Ostertag, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank UNITAR for having me here today. It's nice to hear from everyone and learn from everybody. I'd like to thank my panelists as well, and I'll get straight to the point. Usually when I talk about WPS, I always start by saying that women experience peace and security differently than men. My experience in security sector reform has taught me that there is a difference in how peace is perceived and experienced in a country, in a community, and in a home. And those experiences are highly varied based on sexual and gender identities. While peacekeepers and peacekeeping missions have traditionally focused on implementing large public security frameworks and stabilizing countries during or post-conflict, less work has focused on peace and security in private communities and the homes of individuals across the world. Security sector reform has shown that even in countries that know political and military peace inside and outside of their international borders, there is also very often insecurity and abuse that takes place within the home. COVID-19 has revealed some pretty eye-opening statistics around the world that demonstrated that incidences of domestic violence are on the rise in many countries, even those where we might assume that appropriate legislation exists and trained law enforcement officers are well equipped to deal with these events. In countries where there are few legal frameworks and little human capacity to deal with violent offenses that occur in the privacy of the home, women are disproportionately at risk of becoming victims of violent acts. So current police reform projects focus on the elimination of domestic violence. This reform happens in several stages. So first of all, legislators are informed of the necessity to change laws to protect individuals in their homes, and then training and education is done for public service employees, such as police officers. This training focuses on two things. One is giving police officers an understanding of why individual human rights need to be protected in both the public and the private spheres. And it also focuses on giving police officers training on how they can use newly legislated laws to exercise their duties and to protect individuals who experience violence both inside and outside of the home. So I'm going to talk very briefly about some challenges that we've faced as security sector reformers in the past year, and certainly in the context of COVID-19. First of all, it was hard to give police officers an understanding of why the elimination of domestic violence is important in a culture where there is still a strong division between private and public concepts of peace and security. And there's also little education on gender roles and gender identity. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, countries saw an increase in domestic violence due to stay-at-home orders, and many women were forced to abandon work in the public sphere to do childcare at home. This also gave them little or less access to extended family and friends outside of the home. COVID-19 was also a challenge to security sector reformers in trying to access frontline police officers to give them appropriate training when it was most needed. COVID-19 and the pandemic was also a challenge to community services that were already in place and that were struggling to gain recognition or appropriate funding. So examples of these would be safe homes for women escaping domestic violence, and also social and psychological care and support in the community. I'll speak briefly about my experience specifically in Ukraine. So in Ukraine, the Ministry of Internal Affairs recognized the importance of continuing domestic violence training for its frontline police officers during the pandemic, which was super important. I think the success of this project was due to women with a sound understanding of gender equality working in decision-making positions at the ministerial level in Ukraine, and also women in decision-making positions in police training units as well. So part of the success of this training was due to the Ukrainian government's recognition that it was necessary to provide online training in the context of the pandemic. Among other things, this online training gave police officers tools to be able to better respond to domestic violence incidences. And it made police officers aware of the concept of a safety plan for individuals leaving a violent relationship. The training also gave them information on how to build regional and community partnerships, and taught them that the approach to eliminating domestic violence should be holistic. So even though there have been successes in training police officers on new domestic violence laws, the pandemic has really brought to our attention the problem of domestic violence worldwide, even in countries where police officers and judiciaries have had a longer and more stable engagement with domestic violence laws, and the police have had a good understanding of what their authorities and responsibilities are in responding to domestic violence events. Cases of domestic violence have still increased dramatically since the beginning of the pandemic. I think that this shows that there's still a lot of work to do in prevention and public understanding of the root causes of violence towards women. And there's still a lot of work to do in understanding what are gender roles and what is gender identity. COVID-19 has served to remind us that even where appropriate legislation and well-trained first responders are in place, peace and security is still extremely fragile. So I think I'd like to leave you with that, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ostertag, and especially for sharing your experience in Ukraine and this emphasis that you made on the role of culture and to shift views on established gender roles. I'm sure this may come up in the Q&A section of our event. Let's now hear from someone who has direct experience in the security sector as well, but also peace operations, Colonel William Nortey, who is a consultant on peacekeeping and gender for UNITAR, but also a trainer at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Accra, and the directing staff at the Ghana Armed Force Command and Staff College. He's also a former UN peacekeeper. Colonel Nortey, over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good afternoon to you. Let me go straight since the time is quite short. The case for women's participation in peace support operations has been largely made by the previous speakers, particularly from Madame Diop, and active participation of women leaders in peace processes across the continent and also the world at large in areas such as the Central African Republic yield the desired impact for new lessons to learn for implementation for future leaders. On a personal level, I have witnessed firsthand how the deliberate inclusion of 15% women in my battalion in Lebanon in the period 2017 to 2018 impacted positively on my operations and brought the unit into the limelight. I can say that that single decision is what started the process and got me on the path to becoming a gender champion in the future.
I'm really sorry because
as the fact go, it was
cutting a lot, and so may I suggest that you maybe stop your video? We could maybe hear you better. Let's try that if you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I hope this is better now.
For now, it is perfect. Thank you.
So as I was saying, the immediate experience was that in Lebanon, where I firsthand saw the impactful nature of including more women in the battalion, 15%, which was about 132 more women. And it was the first time that we had such large numbers. And on the operational side, the battalion brought a calming effect into the areas of operation in the southern Lebanon. There was less tension and more dialogue with the communities. The local communities became more receptive, leading to many collaborations and an overall positive impact. There was also a very vibrant civil-military coordination effort, which was hinged mainly on social interaction and capacity building within communities. And there was active engagement with the youth. These included such small things as learning English and then serving as role models in their communities and their classrooms. On the advocacy side of things, the unit had to be invited to several women's activities, both on the advocacy side and also on the social side. And this was at a time when Lebanon was making great strides to highlight its pivotal roles of women in their society and making formal efforts to get these acknowledged and also for local and international interventions. So it was a pleasant news when in September 2019, after I had left, Lebanon signed its first National Action Plan for Women, a plan that the force, UNIFIL, played a significant role. And I felt a sense of elation knowing that my battalion, at least, contributed in a very small way in the process, but then we were visible. How do we sustain these women leaders who have been in the forefront in various armed services or uniformed services for that matter? One intervention that I think about is national gender plans. Most of the national security services have significantly unbalanced forces due to various reasons, from cultural norms to various perceptions. And this is one of the reasons why we can't get a lot of women into uniformed services. In this space, Ghana, for example, which is consistently increasing its female participation in an attempt to really do a formal gender action plan, we were stuck because we realized that in our regulations, the regulations were counter to what our gender goals were, in that the Armed Forces regulations was actually the stumbling block to growing gender and main women leadership in the armed forces. And immediately we had to set up a board to review all the regulations. So this is a key point that we can start from. UNITAR can help various countries and troop and police contributing nations to start looking at their regulations to actually put women on the map. The next thing that this will assist is that when we have firm gender action plans, then we can increase recruitment. Because if those plans are not in place, then armed forces are going to stick to the way they do things. Finally, when we have these two interventions, then we can look at using mechanisms such as the LC Initiative Fund to actually help TCCs to put in more recruitment and assist middle-level officers in various armed forces to actually mainstream them into leadership paths. Because a lot of the time, most of these women are recruited in either logistics and administrative roles, and they are off the leadership track. These are the three interventions that I'll propose, and my little experience with gendered battalions in UNIFIL. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, William Nortey, for shedding light on what this especially means for national security services. So I'm now very pleased also to give the floor to a human rights and local peacebuilding actor, Ms. Figueroa, who is the co-founder of the Chaparalunas Women's Network for Peace in Colombia. Ms. Figueroa, over to you, and I believe that you will be speaking in Spanish, so our audience can switch the language if they need to.
Muy buen día a todas y al comandante. Soy cofundadora de la Red de Mujeres de Segundo Nivel, ubicada en el sur del departamento del Tolima, Colombia. Nosotros como organización de mujeres hemos trabajado por la defensa de los derechos de las mujeres y de las organizaciones aquí en el sur del departamento del Tolima. En el 2016 se logró el acuerdo de paz entre el Estado colombiano y las FARC. Estos territorios ruralmente dispersos Las mujeres allí nos tocó vivir situaciones de violencia muy fuertes, y escuchar hoy día el lanzamiento de la plataforma de formación de Mujer, Paz y Seguridad para mí es muy importante, porque desde nuestra organización hemos avanzado en que las mujeres empecemos procesos de liderazgo desde nuestros hogares, de nuestro proceso social comunitario, y asimismo poder fortalecer los lazos de confianza entre las mujeres, entre sí mismas y entre su entorno comunitario. Nosotras como mujeres, en el marco de esta implementación del acuerdo de paz, empezamos en el primer punto, que es reformas de transformación regional, que hay iniciativas. Estas iniciativas tienden a transformar el territorio rural en espacios armónicos, que antes hubo guerra, hoy día haya espacios de paz y armonía, con 8 pilares. Esos pilares tienen que ver con educación, con salud, con reconciliación y convivencia, con la seguridad alimentaria, con la reactivación económica, y en cada uno de estos 8 pilares, nosotras las mujeres, lo de género, y en términos de fortalecer las capacidades de las mujeres. Nosotras como mujeres, allí están estas iniciativas, y en estos 3 años que se lleva la implementación, lo que hemos hecho es que somos veedoras y hacemos seguimiento a estas iniciativas, que estas iniciativas se conviertan en programas y proyectos para las organizaciones comunitarias que hay en estos territorios. La importancia, a pesar del COVID-19, lo hemos venido haciendo de una manera, primero, formarnos un poco en manejar estas tecnologías, en que las mujeres desde la ruralidad podamos tener un celular y podamos comunicarnos a nivel vía celular o a nivel de plataformas TICs. Y ahí hemos logrado hacer seguimiento a las...
Ms. Figueroa, we lost you. Maybe you could switch off also your...
políticas públicas de mujeres. Continuamos en espacios de participación como son los consejos de política social, que es un espacio de participación y se le hace seguimiento. ¿Aló? Sí. Nosotros como ¿me escucha?
Yeah, we can hear you, but it's sometimes...
Nosotros como organización continuamos. Nosotros creemos que una alternativa para acceder a poder crecer en nuestro liderazgo es poder tener una herramienta de interlocución con los entes territoriales y sin dejar de lado pues las relaciones sociales y organizativas que tenemos. Además, es muy importante continuar fortaleciendo los procesos psicosociales de las mujeres. Aquí en Colombia ahorita con todo el tema de la pandemia se aumentaron los grandes índices de violencia contra las mujeres. Y ahí el Estado, las instituciones están desde la virtualidad haciendo el acompañamiento a las mujeres que están sufriendo esta violencia basada en género. Entonces, para nosotros estar participando en este espacio, nos encantaría que muchas mujeres jóvenes continúen ese proceso de fortalecimiento a través de las capacitaciones, a través de recibir sabiduría y conocimiento para que se puedan empoderar más y puedan tomar sus propias decisiones, pero que además puedan representar sus propias organizaciones y sobre todo continuar que se logre la implementación de este acuerdo de paz. Nosotros aún estamos acá en el territorio, persistimos en el territorio y haciendo esa transformación, tanto en la nueva, participando en los diferentes espacios de participación. Un ejemplo es que desde la organización logramos hacer una escuela de liderazgo de participación política. Hace 2 años atrás hubo campaña electoral territorial y se logró llegar que se inscribieran en listas a participar al consejo y alcaldías, y eso es un gran avance, que encontrar mujeres que les guste y que identifiquen cuál es la importancia de llegar a ser ahí nos dimos cuenta que las mujeres sí somos capaces y tenemos todas las capacidades en llegar a estos espacios de toma de decisiones. Pero esto es un proceso de aprendizaje, es un proceso de quitarnos los miedos, que sí tenemos todas las capacidades y hoy día contamos con varias mujeres en estos espacios de participación. Y tener la oportunidad que UNITAR abra esta plataforma permite fortalecer y permite que crezcamos más en conocimiento. Nada más, muchas gracias por este espacio de participación. Nos disculpa la interferencia de conectividad.
Thank you so much, Ms. Figuera, and I really am sorry that we couldn't hear you sometimes.
Pero nos estamos adaptando a este proceso por la paz.
Yes, sorry for this communication that was not completely easy with you, and you're joining us from far away. So thank you so much for that. And hearing from the Colombian experience is always helpful, and especially with the work you're doing with young women. So last but not least, we'll hear now from Ms. Kirsi Henriksson, who is the director of the Crisis Management Center in Finland and the director of the DCAF Foundation Council. Ms. Henriksson, over to you, and if you can, keep it to 5 minutes so we can move on to the Q&A question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tina. Yes, 3 points. First of all, of course, happy to contribute to this very interesting event. Congratulations, UNITAR, and definitely congratulations also for the program you just launched today. I would like to respond to the questions asked for the panelists. I believe we need collectively work together to increase the women in leadership positions in regards to peace operations and crisis management operations. Myself, I have experience from the European Union civilian crisis management missions in Mali and in Niger, and I can just say that even though my successors definitely continue to deliver the mandate and do their best, but the feedback I get almost on daily basis from my previous colleagues is that what they lack is that since I left the missions, there hasn't been the kind of emotional intelligence taking place. Because in my opinion, the civilian crisis management and the management, the crisis management in general is about human resources management. You have to take care of the people who are doing the work to support and help to increase the human security in the areas of operations. The second thing is that what is still missing in this in addressing the capacity gaps and successfully achieve gender equality. I myself, I would say that I'm a product of the Finnish National Action Plan. Our first National Action Plan was published in 2008, and I must say that I have been, during my own career, been very much supported by my line ministries, Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Ministry of the Interior, in my career towards being a head of mission in EU civilian crisis management mission. So I'm definitely a product of that. But I think what is still missing is the link between the career path development between the member state, the operational HQs of the international organizations, and at the operations themselves. So sometimes these wonderful women, they just do the path alone and they don't get the support, and that should be addressed. And then the other thing is that this is tough work. I give a lot of there are a lot of Finnish leaders, Finnish female leaders who call me and say, Kirsi, I'm alone. I just can't take this anymore. I'm fed up. Is this meaningful anymore? I would like to quit and go to another job because I just don't manage, because they kind of feel sometimes that this work in the leadership of peace operations and crisis management operations is tricky, because already the culture inside these kind of operations is quite an issue to tackle. It's quite primitive, and sometimes even my European colleagues are taking huge steps back. They forget everything between the flight from Paris to Bamako, what they have learned about gender equality. So you are so alone. And then my final point is about training and career path. training needs to be connected with the career path and with the recruitment. When you are recruiting, when you are selecting staff members to the peace operations, you need to also take into account what kind of training they have received. You have to value the training. You have to value the individual effort to enhance their own skills and competencies in order to be better leaders in the future. So this is something that definitely we need to address more. And then the other thing is that I'm also very much concerned about young women candidates. We definitely need to address also this topic, because I'm already a middle-aged woman. I have been supported, but I still feel that women like us, the gender champions, we have to focus now on helping and supporting the young female future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, you're so right. It's so, important what you mentioned, of course, about the importance of training and professional development, but also this need for support for career advancement for women within the sector. So thank you for that. Okay, so thank you very much for our panel. We will now open the floor to questions from the audience. We have already received several of them, and we have a little bit over a half an hour left for this Q&A session. And so what I would like to say to our audience here and on Facebook, please try to keep your questions short and make sure you specify whom you are addressing your question to. And for our guest speakers, please keep your answers as brief as possible so we can address as many questions as possible. Okay, so let's start with the first question that was addressed to Ambassador Whyte Gómez. What advice would you give to young women working in the world of disarmament and who would like to continue their career in this field? And I think it's a good transition with the points that Kirsi just mentioned in terms of how to help young women.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yes, absolutely. I do think we have to focus our efforts in empowering the new generation to have, I think, first to go very much in detail about the substance of what we're discussing, because we have to compete on the same level of knowledge. But at the same time, I think we as women, we have to be aware that we are not exerting our leadership just to reproduce the same mentality or the same patterns or the same paradigms. So my advice would be prepare yourself, study very hard on the substance, on the matter that you're dealing with, especially in this case that you ask is on disarmament, but try to ask yourself the question of how does this impact women and how women see this field or this aspect. Do we see this in a different manner? And if we do, try to articulate that and contribute on that regard. So my suggestion is be very knowledgeable, but let us try not to just to perpetuate the same thinking and the same paradigms. Try to innovate a little bit.
Thank you so much. And maybe a question that's not exactly the same, but this time addressed to Madame Diop. And we have someone who would like to know how the African Union intends to integrate rural African women in the search for peace.
Thank you. I think that, as I mentioned, that we have three tracks when it comes to negotiation. But within the African Union, we have FemWise that we are training, but FemWise also is not just at the top level as ambassador and representative, but also we did training for women at the grassroots level for them to be also, part and parcel in the reconstruction. And it's bring me, and it's good. I'm going to put our email, our contact for those who are raising questions to be in contact with the African Union, the Peace and Security Department, and to be part of the roster. because I think what is important that we need to look at is also the experts that are there, because mainly when we go to negotiation, they tend to say, where are the women? We don't see them. Yeah, so the women, they don't ask about the men, but they will ask about the women. So I think the UNITAR has to put such a roster and to make sure that those that we train are visible and we can show their skills, their talents, and give them visibility and those stories as well. So I think linking it to the question on Sudan, on South Sudan, for example, you know, women who have been part of the negotiation. At least they pushed the door and they were there and accepted, but it's not enough. Now we are talking about the recovery of South Sudan. We tended to forget that pillar, the fourth pillar of 1325. We talk about participation in negotiation, but it's not enough. We have to go back and continue to build peace, and building peace is a continuity. What we agree in the peace agreement should be implemented, and women have to be part in that sharing of I always say, the sharing of the cake. So we tend to give the reconstruction when we have a new constitution, when we are building new governance mechanism. Women have to be there, and their agenda that articulated during the agreement should be also part of the reconstruction process. It has to be inclusive. For example, the women of South Sudan just had the peace forum. I was attending the meeting and looking into the gender issues, and women have to be there. When there is so much violence happening in South Sudan, so right now we're pushing for the hybrid court, for justice to be done, how women can drive that. Justice and reconciliation goes hand in hand. Otherwise, we will not reach where we wanted the sustainable development of South Sudan. Just to link it to the women grassroots, because the refugees, those I found in the camps, were the one more affected. The rape issues have been there, the violation of their right, etc. And building back better, even after COVID, is also how do we distribute land? How are we the distribution of the land, the issue of access to the economy, access to the resources of the South Sudan, just to give an example. So our holistic approach, we need to look into the whole value chain of peace building, which we put in place the law. We have and I like what UNITAR have said, we start with the self, and we create the group, which create an organization that are sustainable to impact in the society. I think that value chain is needed in many peace building area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madame Diop. And maybe I can open the question also to other of our speakers on more generally, what advice could you give for young women who are looking to have a career in peace and security contexts? Because we see that this program of UNITAR is for emerging women leaders. And so I think that it would be nice to hear from you and your insights on and give you those advice. So is there any of you who maybe Miss Figueroa? You've been working with young women.
Y aquí es muy importante que las mujeres y los jóvenes de nuestras organizaciones estén vinculados y que conozcan cuáles son los espacios de participación. ¿Y cómo lo hacemos? A través de
we lost her again.
De formación, a través de capacitarnos, de transmitir la sabiduría en que los jóvenes están en procesos sociales comunitarios que hay al interior de las organizaciones, y además se invita a que otros jóvenes se vinculen a estos procesos de formación. Tuvimos una experiencia muy linda que hicimos el llamamiento a varios jóvenes rurales que prácticamente desconocían sus propios los derechos humanos como tal, y todos hicimos ciudadanos y los jóvenes, cuál linda experiencia, porque ayuda a fortalecer los procesos sociales comunitarios, pero además se hace un proceso de empalme generacional, ¿sí? Esto ayuda a fortalecer el ser como joven, de mujer o hombre, pero también los comités de jóvenes al interior de las organizaciones. Entonces, así, aquí el llamado es jóvenes que cuando hubo conflicto armado eran niños, hoy día son jóvenes, pues le apuestan a continuarse trabajando acá en el territorio a través de sus procesos organizativos. Gracias.
Thank you so much for this. And maybe Ms. Ostertag, any advice you want to share to young women who want to do similar work? And then Kirsi. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's very important that you listen first what kind of competencies and skills they have and what they would like to, enhance. Do they have, for example, a knowledge of different languages? Are they competent in certain field? And then you kind of like a teacher or career development coaching person. You just provide them kind of the tools that you can start with this or this, because of course in some of these jobs in peace operations, what is required is a certain amount of experience already after you have the sufficient education level. But the thing is that you just, because there are a variety of things you can do and develop your skills and before you become a leader. And that's actually the most important. And then if someone, for example, is managed to get into for example, the UNV, the volunteers, and then they kind of have the first step over there. It is important also for us back in, for example, in our country to provide internships for these kind of youngsters, so they also get the understanding of the member states' point of view in this field. And then they go back again, maybe as an election observer, and then they come back, and then once again they go somewhere else working for an NGO. And then I think this is the way, you kind of, follow, and you're always ready to discuss and coach them during their career. It is very important to just listen to the young women.
Thank you. And Ambassador Whyte Gómez also has some advice she wants to share. Yes.
I also want to build on what Kirsi was, that we should combine substance and skills. Because many times we are devoted to only learning about the substance of what we are addressing. So, but we have to, and my advice would be, always have in mind this equation. You have to work on substance and you have to work on your own skills. And for that reason, I like this approach of the program that is working on the self, first and foremost. The self because we need women leaders who have a lot of strength. And for that, as it was mentioned, the main aspect is to know yourself, is to know what your skills are and your strengths, and also how to negotiate. I think to be able to be trained in negotiation skills is a very, very fundamental part of the overall empowerment process.
Thank you. Tracy.
Yes, I think just to add quickly to that comment, a lot of the reason why women are underrepresented in leadership roles is not because they don't have skills, or not because they aren't able to do a certain job, or they aren't able to bring new ideas to a certain problem or to a certain project, but it's because they don't have the belief that they can do it. So my advice to any young person, and especially young women who are interested in women, peace and security, or security sector reform, is don't be shy and don't be afraid to present new ideas. And don't, even if you think that your idea is radical or it's outside of the box, don't be afraid to represent what your values are and what you think you are good at, because it will certainly help someone, even if it's just helping one person. It will help advance the cause that you believe in. So that would be my advice to young women.
Thank you so much. And we can move to a question that's with a nice transition for Colonel Nortey, because it's a question about the comment he made of the percentage level of women in a battalion in Ghana. And there was a question whether these women were in leadership position or how many of them were in leadership positions.
Thank you very much.
They clarify by saying, were they planning, organizing, and accomplishing, or just doing the implementation?
So the battalion was a Ghana battalion in Lebanon, and a lot of the women were.
Maybe you'll have to
leadership roles, and because when
I apologize. Yeah, let's try without the camera.
Right. I hope this is better.
Yes. Yes.
So as I'm saying, the battalion was a Ghanaian battalion working in Lebanon. And when you have such large numbers in the battalion, you would definitely have to have some women in key positions. So the battalion has about 9 key subsections, which is the S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, S6, X7, S8, and X9. And I'll explain very quickly. So the S2, which is the information officer, the X5, who was the planning officer, and the X7, who was the training officer, as well as the S9, which is the civil military communication officer, were all women. For the deputies, we had deputies for the S1, which is personnel, and then S4, which is logistics, as well as a deputy for S6, which is communications. So this was a very experimental battalion with a lot of women in leadership roles. And the story after the mission has been captured in a journal to actually expose how they fared. And since then, this has become a mainstream thing for Ghanaian battalions to ensure that more and more women are brought onto the leadership space. So this is my response. It was heavy with the women leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for shedding more light on how women were integrated. And it's really nice to hear that there were women in leadership position indeed. So maybe to go back to a comment from Tracy, there's a question a bit related to that, and it's a question for all of you, is how do you think, or do you think that women perceive of or exercise power differently than men, and if so, why? And what is the impact of that? So who would like to take this question? Yes, Tracy.
Well, I spoke quite a bit about security sector reform and how police respond to incidences where predominantly women are victims, but I didn't talk a lot about how women are represented in police forces. And I think when we talk about how do women and men experience peace and security differently, we can talk about how women experience harassment in the workplace and why that's contributed to less women developing their careers in police work or in security sector reform. So I think women experience peace and security differently because they're more at risk of being victims, but also because they are more at risk of not being able to develop careers in prevention of the very violence that they experience or that they may experience at some time in their lives. So one thing that's important as we develop training for police officers and enabling them to respond to violence that's perpetrated against predominantly women, we need to understand that within security sectors and within police forces traditionally have been male dominated, and that women who work in these spheres also experience professional relationships differently as well. And that working on comprehensive harassment policies in the workplace for people working security sectors and specifically in police services. This is something that's very important to, it can't be neglected and has to be developed and worked on by organizations across the world.
Thank you. Anyone else on this question of the perception of women of power that could be different from men? And maybe that explains why we are where we are. Ambassador Gómez, Whyte Gómez.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. That is absolutely true. The women in leadership positions are measured against different standards. Absolutely true. Especially, of course, in those fields that are traditionally male dominated. And women are tested on the grounds of knowledge, but also on the grounds of skills. And I think there is a whole field of study that goes into detail about the differences, because there are differences in which women exert or behave when powerful or positions of power or leadership. So I think that for instance, the program by UNITAR that we are launching today is a very good opportunity to make women get in touch with those realities of, first of all, that the perception and the measurement is going to be different. That is a let's say, an additional challenge for women, and an additional challenge that many times make women not want to take leadership positions, because it's going to be a little bit harder on us or tougher on us. And especially, like, for instance, when there is recognition about the successes of a process that is being led by women, sometimes the recognition is not on her skills or her achievements, but on other considerations. See, that is something that is proven by the studies in this field. So the program can help in making women understand those special challenges, but also in helping bridge also in the perceptions of these differentiated ways of measurement with women leadership for the overall public. That is definitely a reality, and that is a field in which we need to have more awareness raising, I think, and more training. It's just we are just being treated differently and measured differently. Of course, now there has been in 2020, there has been a very interesting phenomenon of how, especially in the media, has praised the way in which women, heads of government or heads of state, have dealt with the pandemic. And that's a very important aspect that we have to consider. And just to study what are the traits of leadership of those women in those positions that have made their experiences or their handling of the situation much better, much productive, and to depart from that perspective of cherishing those specific traits that we women do bring, like more empathy, more collaborative approaches, and yes, aspects of that sort that need to be better appreciated when assessed in leadership positions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for Ms. Henriksson.
Yes, I would just, in regards to the power, I would just add another element that you have to take into account is actually in the peace operations, you have civilians, really full civilians. Then you have police, and then you have also the military. And in my opinion, it is already quite an issue to tackle, to have so many different people with different background to work together because in their own respective countries, they may have never worked with, for example, civilians in their own uniform work. So it is a new discovery when they go to the peace operations. And sometimes I feel that the uniforms have more power, even women, than the civilian women who are in power. So that's also another topic. And even the civilian men are not perhaps so powerful than the men who are law enforcement agents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have a question that's a bit more large than what we've been touching upon right now. It's maybe if you had to name one hurdle that's in your mind the biggest that you see for the increased representation of women in positions of leadership within your context, what would that be? The biggest challenge that you're encountering? Who would like to go first? Maybe Madame Diop? You're mute. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Let me just first say something regarding the peacekeeping operation. At the AU, we have the zero tolerance policy when it comes to gender-based violence, but the member states have to apply the code of conduct and the training before we deploy. What Kirsi have said is even from the country level, there is no cohesion. So how do we make sure that we sensitize? When I visited AMISOM, one of the biggest troop contributor that have 3% only is Ethiopia, that have women in our troops in the AMISOM fighting against Al-Shabaab. And I ask why we don't have women, especially in the military, at the top, like the Ghana have just experienced. But they said, the women said, the men think that we cannot face in this new war, because the new war is not about having the guns and having the enemy in front of you and shooting. There's no longer that kind of warfare that we face. It's intelligent gathering. There is a lot of technology about it. And they say we are as intelligent as the men to be leading into our operation. So I think we need to consider the new theater of war, and the leadership of women is not about just men, because it's not muscles, but it's also intelligent, and it's how you manage the operation. And women are very good at that. So we need to show those cases as well. So secondly, you just ask what of the challenges? Many times people ask me, what are the challenges you face? And when I look at the 4 pillars of 1325, I mean, we are not achieving any of them when it comes to that. Maybe it's a time that we need to train the men, and I link it to where we are right now. We talk about the youth, and I'm very happy that with the young women that want to get into the security sector, for example, in Africa Women Leaders Network, we are doing retreat with the young. Africa, the elders and the youth, coaching, mentoring, and training, because they need that. They need our experience. We had experience ourselves. We have not achieved what we want as the elders, but the young people need to learn from us, and we need to learn from them as well as we go along. So I think that creating space where we can mentor the young people. So now the men, I think we need to make sure that the men are part and parcel of what the Women, Peace and Security agenda. If we don't give it, if we just train, it will be ourselves, because if we want to dismantle the patriarchal system that exists in our society, the men have to be targeted as well. So that is one of the big issues that we have in the Africa context. And we are even trying to have a men forum with some head of state to discuss themselves, to say what we need in the continent to make sure that we are getting there, and the society, it's a societal issue. So Tina, I think the big challenge is to bring on board more men, wise men, and the he for she's, that are needed in this context of WPS. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, definitely. Absolutely. Anyone else on one other big challenge that we face before we can conclude this event? Okay. This seems like the big challenge. So
maybe final thing, the civil society groups that are listening, women's group are asking in this process of resolution 1325, 20th anniversary, Beijing 25 is how do we fund, how do we mobilize funding for the victims, the survivors, they don't call them the victims, the survivors, but the human rights activists. They need somebody have raised the issue of those who are in conflict zone, but those who are in democratic turbulence right now in countries where we see civil society, women's rights at the front to ask for democratic institution, fighting corruption. Those root of some of those conflict need to be addressed, and the human rights group, we don't leave it to the government alone, but we make sure that civil society is strong, are there for the citizen participation. And I think what UNITAR is doing is to make sure that it is strong citizen partnership in the platform. So the women have to be trained as well and bring into that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And maybe, sorry, maybe I can, address one last question to Svenja from UNITAR. There were different questions from the audience, very interested to participate in this program, and I can understand why. So could you just, explain what was in the chat at some point? I think it's important before we leave.
Yes, thank you, Tina. And thank you, everyone, for your contributions. We've been monitoring the chat and have been answering parts to these questions. But for everyone, today's the launch, and we are very excited. And we understand also the excitement and the need for the program really to benefit large audiences. At this very moment, we are seeking to build institutional partnerships first to pilot this program, and really to see that what we are envisioning has the effects and the impact that we envision, and then to scale on bigger levels. So we're looking right now really for institutional partners, but we have the vision, of course, that further down the line, this program will be open for enrollment, also for individuals who are interested to follow this program and to be part of it. The reason why we're looking at institutions really then to also connect it to what a lot of the panelists have said, because of course, on one hand, there's personal motivation, but on the other, there is how do we create environments in which then also these emerging women leaders get the opportunities and the support they need to really have the opportunities to step into leadership positions. So that's the thinking we have in mind, and we are with this program hoping to do our bit of it and join forces with others. Thank you, Tina, and thank you all.
Thank you. And I've been asked if our distinguished speakers could all put their cameras on so that there's a group picture before the end of this event, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. And so we are going to, I'm very grateful for all your insights and in particular, the audience who has been actively participating and showing, a strong interest for this new program that UNITAR is launching. So that's really wonderful. And sincere gratitude also to our speakers and their, all the efforts that you've all been investing in making women's inclusion and meaningful participation in peace processes a reality. And finally, to UNITAR, thank you so much for launching this important program, because I'm sure you will receive many more inquiries than the ones that we have seen today. And we wish you really all the best for this important endeavor, and are looking forward to hearing more about it in the months to come. So thank you so much for organizing this event, and for everyone, take care.